haven't heard from them in a while.
Does everybody, everyone have a copy? Okay. Is there an extra copy? All right. Hey, Selectman Mike Doyle, you want a copy of today's docs?
Yeah, you got an extra.
I think we do.
No, I can still Tony's in pocket. Thank you, sir.
You make it up there?
Thanks.
All right, so let's go through our packet. Everybody, you have a list of documents. So let's go right to review of July 19th meeting summary. Any questions, concerns, corrections?
No.
Make a motion that we accept the July meeting minutes.
Second?
All in favor? Aye.
All in favor? Aye. Any abstentions? More importantly, let's identify ourselves. Bob Cornish, Chair of the Building Committee.
Jeff Shaw, Principal at Context Architecture.
Eric Swan, Vice Chair.
Kevin Heffernan, OPM Vertex.
John Keller, Secretary of the Committee.
Zell Johnson, Comcast Architects.
I'd like to welcome Selectman Mike Doyle, who's sitting in our audience. Mike, you're welcome to join us, as we actually answer to you.
All right, so I'll come up if you won't mind.
Okay.
So I didn't dress for the occasion.
Well, it's up to you, but we certainly want to recognize the high office you hold within our community. Vacation.
If you disagree with it, she can back you.
Yeah. That's just making sure.
I like that. Can you play it down?
Oh, I know where my pointed cover is.
All right, so, gents, what we're going to do, we're going to discuss matters of finances and pricing, things that we're going to be negotiating. We're going to be discussing those in executive session. So Zell, why don't you give us, excluding,
An update on the status
Yeah.
of the project.
Right.
We are in the final coordination period of assembling all the construction documents, from getting the final bid documents from our consultants and finishing all the miscellaneous details and the final spec items that have to be included in the specifications. We hope to be done with that. We're mostly done, 99% finished with that process. This week, we will clean up any remaining pieces next week. And we should be ready to issue the documents on schedule as previously decided.
so are we still contemplating a release ready for bid end of August?
Yes, we can do that. Now the only piece left in the process is contracting with online bidding service. And we will contact who we've used before. If there's no bid docs online is a service we've used before.
I mean, from my perspective, anyone that's compliant and.
Yeah, they do a good
Chapter
job.
149,
They did a good job for us last time.
Okay.
We'll get a proposal from them. And we'll submit that to the committee for review.
And in short, to simplify, maybe you could just say for the record what the.
Oh, the purpose of the electronic bidding is to streamline and simplify the entire bidding process, because it allows for us and all the other parties involved to have a single source of communication, and all of the bidders will have constantly have updated information in response to their questions online. And it really does take a lot of the time and effort that normally would go into monitoring the bidding process, and puts it in a third party's hands, and They organize it, and it's a very, very good system.
And I had a follow-up question to that. How are there pre-bid RFIs? How does that work with the filed sub-bid? Are there, can you ask questions?
So
Yes.
definitely there will be questions, those questions typically in the specification we write and that they are emailed to us and to Vertex at the same time. And we will respond to those. We can post addendums through the online bidding company. Those, because you have to sign up with the online bidding company in order to post your bid, they automatically get, or to receive the documents, they automatically get sent out to all the plan holders. We also, in the specification, require that anybody that wants a hard copy set sent to them has to go through bid docs online as well. So that way, even if they're not possessing the electronic documents, that they still get sent addendums, even if they have hard copy. The only other way to view the documents, and it's required under state law, is that the town has a set of documents available for view only at town hall. So if you didn't want to go online, you didn't have access to the online documents, you could literally go to town hall and look at the documents there. But if you wanted a hard copy set, you get them through bid docs online. They have a printing relationship with a printer, and that would be sent out to them. Addendums through the filed sub-bid period would be appropriate for, or particular to those trades, and then after filed sub-bids are received, which they are published electronically, and anybody can view those, but it's up to the town to accept them. And once those are accepted, then we'd be moving on to the general bidders, collecting their bids about 2 weeks later, and we may still issue an addendum, but it would only be related to non-filed sub-bid categories, and anything in those addendums. We would not have to issue an addendum to publish the filed sub-bid results, because they're provided automatically, although some towns still like to do that. It's not necessary. And then the final bid results would be available when those bids are received. One of the other advantages, Del touched on it, is that when the bids are received, nobody has to tabulate them. You don't have to spend any time. If you want them due 12 noon, instantaneously at 12 noon, you have a tabulated sheet of bid results. So, you know exactly where everybody stands. And then you obviously have to vet the results, and get the information from DCAM for their scoring for public projects and reviews that they've had done on public projects. But
Are there any RFIs that usually require the committee, or most of them?
not typically. It's usually clarifications. Occasionally there'll be something that we have to make a decision on in terms of what way we want to go on something, but it's very rare that that happens. And if it does, we can always call an emergency meeting to make that.
Now, do we have, will we have, as a community, access to that site?
We can put as many people on the results
Yeah,
as
if you want to.
needed.
I
There'll
think we
be-
wanted to see how it's progressing.
Well, I think just from chain of command, it should be town administrator, board of selectmen,
At least.
all right? And, I mean, they're the final decision makers. I would then let them delegate any recommendations and reach out to us. I mean, we can't make a determination or
Right, I
appropriate.
just referred to, we could see the results as the who was bidding
I
on it and
agree
stuff
with
like that.
that. So I think it should be open to all of you, and then like I said,
Okay.
and so that everyone can keep track of what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, there's no limit to you forwarding the link to
Right,
wherever
no, I
you
think
want.
that-
It's just a matter of getting the automatic
Right.
email when those results are available.
I think, again, just to respect the chain of command, should go to the board of selectmen and to Tracy. And then you can all forward it to us.
Okay, all right.
All right, because at the end, we'd rather have you all drop of shock rather than us. Mike, if you're huffing and puffing when you call us, we'll know that
It's wonderful.
bids came in very low. All right. Item 5 on our document sheet, context invoice dated 8/7.
We should get invoices for both contacts and virtual. It could be something.
I haven't, what's the date of those invoices?
Let's see, context was 8/1, And Vertex is,
8-1 or 8-7?
It's,
I probably didn't know right last.
66,000?
yeah.
Yep, 8-7.
Okay.
And Vertex's is 5-6.
Okay. All right, do we have a motion for conditional approval subject to our OPM's letter of recommendation?
Move that to the.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the invoice.
Do we have a second?
A second?
Okay, any discussion? It follows the payment schedule. I think it's a milestone to be 55.97% complete. I think we're a little further along than that, but all in favor? That's unanimous. Okay. All right, moving on. Item 6, public meeting update regarding local approvals and permitting. All of the site plan review was approved by the planning board. It was duly filed with the secretary of the town clerk. The appeal period has expired without any appeals. Conservation's order of conditions issued. It was submitted to DEP for their 10 business day review and appeal period, and no appeals were presented. So from local permitting outside of the building permit, the town has secured all the necessary permits. I want to say that we did this in about 90 days. That's quite a team effort on, this committee's part, but certainly on our architectural engineering team to be prepared and responsive.
Very impressive.
And the town in general. I think both the planning board and conservation commission extended every courtesy to expedite this, without overlooking any of the critical detail. But I think I'm pretty impressed.
I'm too.
That could have been 9 months to a year, just as easily as. Jeff, I imagine you've got a few horror stories of.
It's been a few.
A few too many. All right, so.
Team effort.
The only other thing is the Board of Selectmen voted to waive all building permit fees. So the only remaining local permit will be the building permit, and that would be secured by the successful bidder. Basically, right? There's no,
Right, because the superintendent's name goes on it in his license.
yeah.
Yep,
Okay, so he'll be the construction supervisor for,
the project.
okay.
So I believe, isn't there one from Newburyport for water? I don't know that the town of Newbury could waive
You know, that may be,
water sewer connection.
well, you know, that's a good
I
point.
thought they started, is it all ready to go?
It's all ready,
Yeah.
everything's been coordinated, but in terms of paying the fee,
Okay,
for that connection.
Those ancillary
and
fees
getting-
outside of Newbury will just be part of the general condition.
Yeah, they'll include it, I just wanted to clarify so that
Yeah.
there's that one.
I think it'd be important though to make sure that in the bid package that waiver of all the building permit.
Yeah,
Because that
yeah,
would
we
be
will write that into the front end. We'll also-
50K, that would be in your,
I think we'll write it in as if pertaining to the fees from Newbury itself, so that it's clear any fees they pay to a district or outside of the town are not waived.
anything beside water and sewer, we're not gonna, that'd be the only outside entity.
Yeah,
And
that they would pay a fee
Yeah.
for it in the town.
typically municipalities would be,
But we specifically have to state that the building permit is.
Yes,
has
correct.
to be paid.
right. Yeah, there's no cost there.
No, it does not have to be.
Well, I mean,
It does
in the
not.
selectmen's wisdom,
That's what he said,
yeah,
no
No
fees.
fees.
no, they've all been
Except
waived.
for
Except for
anything
water and
outside
sewer
of
connection.
Okay.
Right.
Newbury itself.
I think when the water and sewage connection was budgeted out for the police station, fire station, I know we had a lot of extra money.
Yeah.
So the money might be there already.
Yeah. Well, I think
Maybe.
I think the big thing, Mike, is the water sewer tie-in fee. Typically municipalities, intermunicipality documents don't necessarily I don't expect it to be a vast sum.
The
The building permit fee could be 35 or 40.
I think all we just need from our perspective is confirmation as to whether or not the general contractor is expected to pay for it, or if the town is going to be paying on behalf of the project.
I think, why don't we do that? I think if we do that, then you know what happens is, are there 2 copies there?
There's two of each.
I think the town will directly pay those fees,
That makes
and
sense,
then that way there keeps it clean.
yeah.
Thank you. All right, any other comments on public meeting approvals update? Okay, let's go to project open items. So as we go down the list here, on item number 2, Zella, you all set with TCS, or are you awaiting any documents from them?
We have not received any further information from DCS since our initial contact.
Okay.
So we have basically provided details and structural details and architectural details based on those initial, that initial information package. And if there are any changes, we will have to modify what we've drawn. But we have not received any additional information.
Kevin, you want to put what?
Yep, and in discussion, I've copied Zell on several emails to Todd, getting an update from him, making sure that he has provided context, everything he needs to do. Unfortunately, I've not heard back from Todd this week at all. So again, we have reached out several times to him. I know he's in the process of completing the design. At our last meeting, he said it would be about, well, last time you and I spoke, he said it would be about 2 weeks to get all that information.
Very disappointing
Yes, 2
with
weeks.
TCS, man, I'll tell you what, if they were a preferred vendor of ours, we'd be looking elsewhere.
Right.
I do recognize that everybody is overwhelmed with the amount of work going on, all of us included, but we're not looking for a lot of documentation from them, and it's disappointing.
But like Zell said this morning, there might not be any changes to anything.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
That's
no,
why
no,
he's not
it-
coming back.
That's my whole point.
I just wish he would communicate that,
Yeah,
that he's done, we got no problems. But unfortunately, he has not, so I can't give the committee a perfect, this is all complete update.
all right, Kevin, review current costs for commissioning and testing.
Yep.
You had sent out a document, dump
That's
at
it.
10:37 last night.
Unfortunately, like you said.
Yeah,
We're
no.
all busy.
I made copies of it, I didn't have a chance to staple, let me,
Okay.
Donuts. Zella, you hoarding those donuts?
Yes, he
Yes,
is.
I'm eating
Yeah, I
all
agree
of
with
them.
So none for Jeff, one yeah.
You don't wanna see those, do you?
No, I don't. No. Oh, thanks. Thanks a lot, pal.
Have your sugar right back.
Buddy.
Open so we can see it.
Yep, I agree. Yep, get the smoke on this, that's awesome.
Oh, that's nice.
With friends like these, who needs everything, I'm telling you.
That's all right, we're all set back here for the donuts.
You good, you good like that, everyone?
Did you want anybody speak? Did you hear anybody speak?
Nope, I didn't.
Oh, I'm glad I came to the table.
see, most projects have a Christmas tree dropping off party, we have a donut party here.
Bob, with the chief not being here, do you have an extra copy of this up there?
No, we already given.
Mike got the other copy.
I'll give you a copy.
No, I have.
Okay,
From the-
I'll get John at the meeting.
Well, Chance, I apologize, these didn't come out,
Well, everybody up here.
they were
except
sent out
Mike
electronically.
Was, is the only one that doesn't have, Mike, I don't have your email.
I'll give it to you.
So if you give it to him, I'm sure you get all of those.
Yeah, I can forward it to you.
Okay, you said
Because the
one.
chair, I want to control the flow of the documents, okay? So just, as you know, I like to have everything by 6 o'clock Wednesday, so that I'm not scrambling at midnight the night before the meeting.
Oh, you like getting woken up by a delivery.
Yeah, you know what, it's. This isn't
Just
really-
on a side note with regards to, we received 3, we've requested 5.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for one other one to come in. So right now, we have the minimum that we were supposed to receive. Some of these proposals that you'll see and look at has all 3 components that we had originally were asked for. Some of them are a menu stop, you look at which one you might want, but all of them have the electronic component that seem to be the wish of the committee, as well as the building envelope. So I ask that everybody just take a look and get back to me, so we can then move forward with the desired.
At a quick glance, the reserves that we have on our estimated probable cost exceed the amounts that have been proposed.
One of them they do not.
Well, it had more scope in it, that was kind of the 100%.
There's the one that, yes, exactly, so.
Let's turn on your open items document, turn to the second page. It lists all the testing for the project, just so we're all on the same page. And thank you, Jeff, for preparing that when you did, or Zell.
That was,
Of course it was Zell. So just going, why don't we quickly go through this, just to do a double check of what we were looking at. Eric, why don't you go forward from here?
Go forward. List required testing for the project. So site and prep work. Observation of ground, improvement elements, grouted, ungrouted, vibration monitoring during installation of ground improvements. Is there any survey required of adjacent properties for something like vibration?
Usually,
well, we don't require it, but you certainly could.
Could do it.
Could do it if you want.
But we're not blasting, so
Yeah,
I'm
it's-
the closest resident.
It's not,
so we'll know. We'll
Yeah.
monitor.
for this type of a project, I wouldn't expect it. We are doing.
I wouldn't expect it either.
We are doing the aggregate piers, which will have some vibration associated with it, but it's not a lot, it's not like blasting or anything like that.
Observation of load testing. Is that testing spelled out by structural? Is that the testing of the piers? Is there some?
it's
It's for the piers, yeah, it's for the load testing that's actually required of the contractor doing the aggregate piers. Essentially, it'll be done after they finish, they'll test their pier to make sure that they have the strength required in the
So
design.
self-performing work, kind of.
It's kind of a design build
Yeah.
situation, they design it, build it, and then perform a test to confirm that they meet the load.
So it's a registered professional that is certifying it.
They have their own test, yeah, and in fact, if they're low, they have to come back and for at no cost to the town to adulterate it.
So that it makes no sense to do peer review on that type of testing.
Correct.
Or could you sell it?
We would just see it as a submittal, and,
well,
but ultimately, they're just saying, we're
they use an engineer and they stamp it,
Yeah.
so. it's
Yeah, we're not taking on any liability by being the ones that are
Nope.
contracting and accepting.
Yep.
Yeah. Typical observation of footing, bearing surface prep, observation of slab on grade, surface prep, observation placement of compacted fill, and in-place density testing, which is pretty standard.
Yeah.
Now we're down to structural, so soils and foundation testing.
So let's just hold for 1 second on the site prep work. Kevin,
Yes.
on what would our commissioning agents do there?
Nothing.
They would all be done
Nothing.
by the registered professional?
No, we would go and procure an owner's testing agency, an independent one.
Okay, has that been covered in your submittals here?
No, that's just strictly the commission. This stuff gets done usually after the specs and the final drawings are completed, because then they'll do their testing based on the specifications to work off.
Okay, do you have a recommendation on?
Oh, I have 3 that we've used constantly, but again, you gave me several of them
Yeah.
for the commissioning. we'll do the same thing again.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, they're all different versions of the same. We have 3 pricing. They come in high, we'll reach out further, but, so that'll be after bidding.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
They usually turn that around the same day.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No,
Yeah,
it's-
Not as long of a process as.
No, I just think so, we're all on the same page, and certainly, you know, our audience present.
So, go ahead.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Structural,
Excuse me.
soil and foundation testing, cast in place concrete testing. They take samples of the concrete and do strength testing. Masonry testing, is masonry testing more of just certificates, or are they actually breaking and double checking?
We do grout, usually, grout.
So it's not actually the units come with a certified certificate of meeting ASTM stuff. Structural steel testing, it's probably certification, welds and mill tickets. And then wood framing. So wood framing is the one that seems to be the most out there because it's the most haphazard piece of the structural system in terms of parts and pieces going together. So is it just field observation?
It's usually just an observation of the connections.
And nailing patterns on.
Because you'll get a submittal on the lumber, you'll get a submittal on nails and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's not making sure the pieces themselves have capacity, it's making sure that, you know, they've been put together in the right way.
The number of nails are actually in there, and the connection
Exactly,
plates
they
are
nailed
actually
it
in
at the
there.
right pattern
And obviously the fasteners are the proper size.
yeah.
That's submittal issue.
Well, I mean, they've actually used the correct
Oh.
fastener, yeah.
Well,
Not that
everyone
roofing
used
nails
to
to
use
attach
12
the
penny
sheet.
gun nails, because that was the biggest gun nail, they'd add an extra nail, but it never complied with
Yeah.
joist or rafter installation of the building code.
The question I have on the wood is, because all the new shear loads, often spruce is not used anymore, it's got to be a higher FB rating. Are we running into that on this design?
I don't think so. I mean, there's a lot of LVLs.
Right.
And because of the spans involved, and the loads. But other than that, the vertical bearing walls, I think, are standard grade. I don't
So the
think-
PSLs and LVLs are taking the brunt of
Yeah,
the loads.
it's the standards that are the issue of the vertical loads. We're also utilizing quite a bit of shear walls in order to make the system work properly, which helps the whole frame work. But I don't think we're looking at anything unusual in terms of lumber.
Do we have swash blocks requirements here with PSLs going from floor to floor and with plates?
I don't think you have any PSLs. Do you have columns that are
I
PSLs?
don't think so. I think they're solid.
Just columns.
Okay.
I mean, we'll check. I mean, but our structural engineer has done pretty extensive.
Cool. So squash blocks are required when you plate goes across. It can't be a light, it's going to be something heavier.
Yeah,
If we don't have any PSLs, it doesn't matter.
The point for number 5 is it's more of an observation than an actual
Yes.
test.
That's
That's what I was trying to get at.
So on the structural, does that fall in the same category as
Yes.
site
Owner,
prep,
yes.
which is after building owner?
Yeah.
Most of the firms will do that testing.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a one-stop shop. That's what we want to know is if we're hiring one or
Like
two people.
UTS would come in, and they would cover everything.
Yeah.
PSI is another one.
Out of plumbing, you get a pressure test of all piping systems, which is basically for the code. Chlorination of domestic water piping, also by code. And it's, so these are clear, these are listed in the specifications as requirements by the subcontractor.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'll be done and there'll be a submittal. And hopefully if there's any observation that's typically needed, we would know and sort of forecast that in the meeting so that we understood when it was happening or something.
For which the,
So just any test that the subcontractor is gonna do, we're gonna receive a submittal.
yeah,
or
more than
something.
likely there will not be any requirements for anybody to observe it, that's just getting the report, the test report.
Startup report for domestic water heater. Then we go on to fire protection, flushing and pressure testing of all piping, interior and exterior. It's per NFPA 13, which is a requirement that we'd like to see before, I guess it's required before certificate of occupancy.
Yep.
Again, by, is that provided by the sub?
Yep.
Yep, by the sub. Mechanical, testing and balancing report for all furnace air handling units, including supply and return and exhaust air system. Again, by the subcontractor. We could have that by,
Well, they
would
may
hire.
do it as a sub, as a balancing contractor.
but it's provided through them, and again, it's a
Provided
submittal
through
that comes back through.
Correct.
For review.
Yeah, and it's required prior to occupancy.
Manufacturer's startup report for all split system gas-fired furnaces and associated air cooling condensing units. Are there any, so we're asking the local rep, is that, I guess that assumes that this.
Manufacturer has to be part of that startup for those systems.
And is that part of getting the warranty for those systems? That's
They would be a requirement to get a warranty from the manufacturer, which is also a requirement for the substantial completion.
Okay. Same thing with the next one, manufacturer startup report for ductless cooling unit heating pump AC units, responsibility of the HVAC subcontractor. And we have the next one, due to the smaller building size and corresponding HVAC cooling / heating size, independent commissioning services would not be a code requirement.
That excerpt basically just says that because of the size of the building, you don't have to do it.
Mhm.
But it's something that obviously we now have proposals to do
Yes.
for the HVAC commission.
Number 5, for optimum system performance, the owner could opt to hire an independent commissioning agent to oversee the project system commissioning. I think for 4 and 5, that's what we've agreed or recommended that we do. And then electrical. Required electrical systems to be tested would be the fire alarm system, which is required by NFPA 72, test reports that is provided by the installing subcontractor, and emergency generator, which requires an NFPA 101 generator test report, also provided by the emergency generator. We don't have a fuel fill room, so the generator has a tank, so that's all part of the same test, then it's not a separate.
Are we doing diesel fuel or propane?
No, it's diesel.
Diesel, emergency.
But if you have a tank system, then that's a separate test as opposed to having it as part of a complete package generator set.
Got it.
Is there any, under electrical, is there any circuit testing or closed circuit testing or short circuit study?
Forget if they've got something like that in their
I'm not
requirements.
sure, I don't think so.
And then-
It's the electrical spec.
I think that the, just in general terms, all of the circuits have to be working in order to perform any.
It's not that big of a building, but on
Exactly.
some of my bigger projects, we have a short circuit
Yeah,
study test,
and
which
I've seen
is,
that before, where they've done a sort of a checkout of the system, a full test of all of the continuity.
there's a lot of parts and pieces and a lot of add-ons, and so they're just testing to see if there's somehow a short or some other low voltage, high voltage, some kind of mixed and matched. I don't know if it's required for this type of building, I just have seen it before.
Yeah, we can check the specifications. Oftentimes, things like that end up becoming boilerplate in the specifications, so it may be in there.
Well, if you double check that, that'd be great. I mean, certainly the load testing of the gen set is
Yeah,
the big
that's the
thing.
big one.
Yeah, and that's required.
Yeah, that's an FPA requirement, so.
What's the delay on the generator when they lose power?
Usually it's 7 milliseconds.
It's almost nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we still need the UPS to bridge that gap, but, so the building does have a UPS system.
So, John, do you have any other
I don't.
typical
I can't think of anything else that we haven't read
It's
through
nothing
the list
special here
or.
we're dealing with, so it's pretty straightforward. I endorse the commissioning because there's nothing worse even than a small system, have things go wrong for a couple of years and just can't figure it out.
Mhm.
And it's worth the money to do it.
The underground water retention system should have a inspection certification for them, should they not? Does they install correctly, or is that, can that provided by
I've
the
never
subcontractor?
seen one like that come through.
But bigger,
Boards,
inspection
much-
for it.
much bigger system.
I've seen obviously for septic systems, that
Right.
gets an inspection, but I've never seen one for the infiltration system.
It's not a closed system, it's an open system. So-
Well, I mean, I've seen, actually, I take that back. I've seen local regulatory authorities ask for a report or a checkout. And then the problem is that nobody's done any due diligence to take enough data during the installation. They can say that it's been installed, but nobody can say that, you know, okay, this is exactly how it was installed, and nobody has the pictures to prove it. And in one project, they had to actually, you know, disassemble a certain part of it to be able to prove to the local authority that it was in fact installed correctly. So I have been warning all of the contractors we've been working with in the last few projects that we need documentation, photo documentation of it, so that nobody.
Partly what I'm
has to
asking
take it
for
apart.
is something that gets covered up, and should be, just making sure we understand what.
But we can also confirm with, through Martha, that the town bodies, staff, what their requirements might be for, once we have a permit, or expecting to get a sign off on the permit, that there's no other
Yeah, I'm just
requirements that we don't know about.
thinking of a larger structure that I just put in.
I would say that someone's going to have to certify that the work has been done according to the plan that's been approved.
And typically
By a
that,
professional.
because it's again, it's one of these types of systems where the engineer basically lays it out and then it's given over to the site contractor to provide this design build. That's usually on the site contractor, and this is where the story that I was telling, this is where they got into trouble, because the site contractor doesn't actually take enough documentation to prove it. And so the engineer said, well, site contractor, you have to prove to the regulatory authority that you've done it correctly. And the contractor said, no, I can't do that, so they actually had to take a little piece of it apart. Which is why I was warning them to do that, but taking pictures. But
So
we
is
can
that
also-
language in the specs for them to do an as-built, progress as-built?
We'll make sure that,
Okay.
yeah.
Certainly the clerk of the works.
Yeah, they will
Well,
have, they will
exactly.
definitely have an.
Clerk of the Works will be recording
Taking pictures.
daily activities with pictures, I would hope, on this.
Yeah, I think we will always have an as-built, but I think we wanna go maybe one step further with this particular infiltration system and request that they have some additional documentation of the installation.
Certain milestones of that install.
Yeah, I mean, I don't wanna put it on the clerk. I mean, that's important for them to be there and take
Just-
pictures
just
and
to
just to
have it,
confirm
right.
things happen, but I don't want that to be the only record
Yeah.
of proof that
I agree.
happened, because
Totally
he's
agree.
really the town's representative, not the contractor.
Have the site contractor be culpable for the.
Exactly.
Yep.
Got no more input.
The only other thing that I'd throw out there, and it has a little bit more to do with building envelope commissioning, but in the past, we have seen on occasion somebody ask for a blower door test for air infiltration.
Isn't that required by the building, isn't it a state building?
Where is rating?
It is now in the newest energy code. It's not a requirement under our permit. That would be a requirement for this project. It's definitely a requirement for residential construction. And where we've run into it, strangely enough, is doing fire stations that have a residential component to it. And then you get into how do you section off just the dormitory from the rest of the building, the garage, and how do you do a blower door. It's crazy, but in this particular building, we're a fairly tight shaped building envelope. There's not a lot going on in there to mess it up. So it's not a requirement, but it could be an option that the town wants to choose to do.
Are you recommending we include that in the spec?
I guess I'm saying it's an option. I'm not necessarily recommending we do it. I think it's something to consider and put it in there, but if we do wanna put it in, we ought to put it in before we get bids.
Right, so they're.
I'd say put it in, I mean, you know what,
And I would make the contractor responsible for doing the test, you know, hiring the company, an independent company to do the test and performing the test, so that the town doesn't have to have the responsibility of managing a separate entity to come in and coordinate with the contractor's sequence of construction.
It's not a big deal.
It's not a big deal, but it has to be done at the right time, and it has to be done at a time when the contractor can then make the appropriate
Changes or fixes.
modifications if needed.
All right, moving on, hardware standards. Zell, I had put this together, just a little bit of a, do you need any additional information?
No.
One thing I did notice on the spec, we were using electrified strikes.
Yeah,
I-
It's all been, it's all been,
I'm, you know, I'm not,
all been incorporated. All of this has been incorporated.
okay, so it was,
Spec is done, it complies with.
okay,
these-
I may be one generation behind you.
Yes.
That's surprising.
But I just wanna make sure that Bob's, or these towns' standards are now for not using electrified strikes. It's gonna be an
No, we're going
electric
to electric locks.
locks, okay?
Uh,
Just wanna make sure all these, because that's the most important part of this whole thing, it's the most
Yes.
expensive part of the whole
Yep.
thing.
And all doors will be prepped.
It's a default, it's so much easier doing this.
Much easier if you have the stuff there, the
$10,
raceway.
yeah, it's $10 more prep per door. All right, let's go back to the first page of open items. All right, item 5. Sal, you had sent a request off on June 3rd. And I think it was just having a global meeting regarding Taldata, IT.
You follow it up with another
That happened.
meeting at Alter Place.
Okay.
That all took place.
Do you have any further questions or needs, Sal, or are you all set?
No, the only thing to come out of that is, TCS was gonna forward any additional information if there was additional information to forward. But we have not seen anything.
Okay. All right, let's move on to item 8. Okay. We're gonna be discussing that.
Yep.
Okay.
That's-
Item 15, water main flow pressure testing. Where are we at on that?
We, through our plumbing engineer, they are getting proposal from a vendor who does this work for them on a standard basis. And, I just haven't seen it yet, but he said that
Yeah, that
So,
was a week ago.
that was last week, yes.
okay. I mean, so basically, from my perspective, do you include an alternate for a fire pump now?
I don't
If
think-
we-
I think the test can be done relatively quickly
Yeah,
enough that,
well,
Okay, before you close
and
it
if they,
down. Okay.
yeah, and if they have to put the fire.
yeah, I will check in with him today,
Okay,
just to see, yeah, when we're getting that, but I think that he understands the urgency, certainly. And, I'm thinking that this will probably be
Oh, we did get
done
the proposal.
within the next, we did?
Yeah,
Oh, when?
yep.
Did it?
It was the 8th of August. I signed it.
Oh, the proposal from the. from the-
GGD.
Well, GGD sent their,
To perform the test.
oh,
It's all
okay.
inclusive.
Oh, okay, it is, all right. I thought that was their standard, they sort of said this is
It
what the
was,
typical.
it was about
fee is.
$1,300
Yeah.
to do the test.
Okay. I didn't realize that. I
So
thought
what
we were
you
doing
should
something-
confirm is that they have scheduled it and are planning to do it ASAP.
Well, maybe, since we have it, I mean, we need approval to proceed with that.
The $1,300 additional fee.
Right.
Yeah, it'll be in a reimbursable, we'll submit through
Okay.
the town.
all right, moving on to item number 8, town administrator memo. The town administrator provided an update on financing, bonding, and basically how the town, under municipal law, handles the funding of this proceeding forward. A question to her was, we're going out to bid in August. We will be looking to review and award bids depending on pricing in October. what do we need to have in place as a funding mechanism or bond approval prior to? And she sent back this communication dated August 8th. So the short version to the question is, we're all set to go. At some point in time, I think the town administrator and the board of selectmen will decide when they want to bond this. Right now, the interest rates continue to remarkably drop. I mean, we could be under 2% on this thing when we were budgeting 4.5%. That over a 30-year period, that's extraordinary savings for the town. So any questions on that? That was just the... All right, moving on. Now that we've got through most of the heavy lifting on this project, it's kind of getting down to the finishing touches. Item number 9, police station signage. Eric prepared the following documents to get us going in the right direction. This is being carried as an alternate bid item regardless, but now that we're not worrying about knotweed and groundwater, we get to look at some of these things here. So Eric, why don't you walk us through that if you would?
Sure, I mean, I put it together fairly quickly as more of a means to just have a discussion and make it an actual presentation. But in terms of the package, it's just pulling forward some of the existing Newbury signage, the town seal, the police badge, obviously the sign on top of Town Hall, which at one time said Newbury Town Hall, and now says Newbury Police Department. And so with that thought, as sort of the precedence page, the next page is what was presented in the sign package or for current standing. And I was just trying to take some information that Bob, you had sent a couple photos of local police department headquarters from Rowley and West Newbury, and then sort of put that back in the sign. But I was just kind of getting the essence here. If you guys have any,
Well,
I haven't really put it to scale, let's say. I tried to get some sense of dimension so I could figure it out and understand that if you were...
yeah, no, it seems fine. We're assuming that for the time being, and because this signage will be an alternate to the project, that it's pretty much a go in terms of getting the price. I don't think there's...
Right, so in the rendering, there was a rock wall, and in low in front of the rendering was police station on the rock wall. To be seen and to be pulled down Morgan Ave, you'd like to be able to look down the street and see a sign that says police station and not have it low on a rock wall or have it blocked by any kind of vegetation.
Snow.
So,
Or snow.
or snow. So this sign is proposed to be black with gold lettering, will possibly have the seal, but it simply says Newbury Police Station, and whether it's 5 or 7 Morgan Ave, 5 Morgan Ave seems fairly simple. This would be granite posts on the side, and it would be a wood sign with recessed letterings, again, black face, gold, maybe there's a trim ring around it that kind of highlights the center of it. On the next page was just a clip of the site plan, and it's just really talking about the sight line and where it needs to be placed. It needs to be placed outside the right-of-way, but should be as close to the right-of-way, and it seems to be located appropriately with the landscaping in terms of not having a tree right in front of the sign where we intend its location. So I haven't really moved it from where I think it was originally proposed. Then on the next page was just showing the blow-up of the rendering where the police station was on the stone wall. And two things, I discovered something else too, is that, you know, should we be reusing the police department sign that's now on the town hall, understanding that the existing town hall sign is somewhere, and at some point we'd like to have some signage that's kind of coordinated across the town so that we don't have 6 different types of signs on
three buildings all in a row, that there could be some kind of standardization. So it would be nice if we could reuse the sign that's currently on Town Hall and maybe place that on the front facade.
Yeah, and I would go one better in saying that the sign that we put on the post may wanna actually look like the sign we're putting on the building too.
Getting there, yep.
It's all consistent.
So it, yes, and it has a little more flair than the diagram that I put together. One sec. Okay.
So I think the big thing is in the base, making sure we have power for illuminating the lighting and the lighting for the sign.
So I handle.
Yes.
Well, actually, that's not how it was organized. It was organized currently to provide power to the location and also control mechanism.
Okay, but not the actual
But not the
lighting.
actual fixtures.
Okay.
The actual fixtures were in the end alternate.
That's exactly
Okay.
right.
Okay, yeah, no,
No,
that's,
that we would,
that's.
base bid would provide power
Yeah.
to a handle,
Right.
And interior controls to,
correct? A
Well,
control
there's-
And
circuit.
it's the same with the flagpole next to
Okay.
it. Next to it.
There's a couple pages of precedent images from the local area, and then there were some just different types of general signs with stone or on brick, which all seem to be low and all seem not really to be tied back to, there's not one style here that jumped out to be tied back to our building.
Correct.
The next page was just an old typical kind of bronze sign which had a darker background and then polished frame and polished raised letters, which is pretty standard for historic kind of documentation or donor panels. And on the last, we just took, this was more of a suggestive, more of a decorative type sign. And I was thinking back to the sign that is actually on the, our town green, which is more of a historic sign. Is there any thought to have a hanging sign as opposed to, I think the hanging sign would be a smaller sign, and so the direction, Bob, of looking at a sign that stands up with two posts could be a bigger sign and be seen from farther away. We do have a zoning bylaw for signage that we need to just double check in terms of the size of the sign.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I would think that we're making provisions for this, that I think it would be a good idea that we bring Tracy, Martha, and the Board of Selectmen back in, give them a couple of options like this, and see what they.
And have some forward thinking about the standard for the town that could be used elsewhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it has legs and the thought process here carries forward.
Is there any thought of a sign at the end of Morgan Avenue, Route 1A?
Well, we had talked about a digital sign because other police stations usually have some digital signs that carry news or updates or events, but why would you put it on Morgan Ave because it's too far down?
Right.
So we got past that and said, well, we'd probably kick that to the town hall to figure out what might happen there.
Okay.
And what happens to the town hall, I think that would be the question for that location because it's on the intersection.
The sight line that Eric was identifying is, as you're driving by, you could clearly see the placement of the sign. If you're looking for the police station, you'll see the sign. And that's hence why we're having a freestanding sign.
But we're not suggesting at this point that you can't put signage on a utility pole, but we're not suggesting any other separate signage at Morgan Ave High Road intersection that says police station that way. Because there's none now. To get to the fire
I
department.
think it was in the past, though. It's like for the fire. I know there's been one in the fire department.
So I think in the next town hall, that is a good discussion point of how we make sure everyone understands exactly what's going on Morgan Ave.
Okay.
So I think the question really comes down to, there's two options for the sign. Double post granite with a sign, or a hanging sign off a single post.
Yep.
And, but again, I think we kick that around, get some more fingerprints on it, would be the way to go, so. Anything else on that, Eric?
No, there is existing silver lettering that says police station on this side, on the Morgan Ave side of the police station, which was the original signage for the lower police station, and that certainly could be reused on the side of the building if someone's at the fire station and looks over to the second entrance, they could be remounted there. Somebody's pulling in, not that they need remembering, but if they're pulling that far into the police station, you don't really need signage, but.
They should know where they're at.
Willingly or unwillingly knowing.
Got
they're
it,
going
Mike's house and turned
At that point, they're probably a guest, not a,
This is Mike's house.
So I was just driving, checking the sight lines, looking and saw that we had that existing silvering lettering, if it made sense for reuse. That's all.
Great. Thank you.
Any other, John, any comments on sign?
I've been up in Maine and New Hampshire a lot the last month, and I see the newer ones like over in Stratham, they're doing homes with
The granite seems to be the way to
Yeah.
go.
especially the ones without.
So Mike, what we'll do is, we'll come up with a couple of options, yeah, which is gonna be granite post or freestanding, as you see here. And I think we'll just circulate it amongst,
It will clean up this sort of presentations to walk the discussion through.
well, you know, we can do too, is we can, I'll field measure a couple of signs. The Rowley sign, honestly, one, it's convenient to get to and take a look at. It's a good looking sign, it's 4x4 with posts, certainly a temporary, but
I think your point of bringing it back to the existing sign, that then, you know, maybe the font, the way it has a slight crest at the top, and then larger letters for the actual police station or town hall is, you know, somewhat of the, just, I won't call it historic, but the older sign, traditional sign that we currently have.
I mean, I think the big thing is running it by planning in the building inspector, because he's gonna be doing code enforcement on that sign.
I did send this to Martha as a courtesy, but she's not followed up, nor have I asked her to.
Yeah, I think once we get a little, we'll clean this up a little bit, Eric, and I think we can send that out. It's not going to impede our ability to go out to bid, because
No.
we can have a typical.
We're covered, right, for
Yeah.
location and power, and so we're,
yeah.
And
And
the final, what we will note is that the final design will be,
Well-
reviewed, and we may change it during bidding, or we can still, have wordage.
as long as we own the two granite posts
Yeah,
with a big signboard, if we change it
Yeah.
to something else, we probably have.
Right, if the material change is a different story, but if it's a wood sign, what the
That won't
decision
be
is
a wood,
made.
it probably won't be a wood sign. It'll probably be a urethane,
Oh, well,
For
longevity.
What we'll do is we'll clean up this drawing here as the typical. Where two posts are gonna be more than a single post.
Yep.
And we'll just make sure 48 inches might be, the others always seem to be about 60, 65 inches. They seem
yeah, I need to go back and read the zoning bylaws, double check the size of typical
Okay.
signs and,
Okay.
as
So I
I
think we can
said,
do that, Eric, if you could take that on, that'd be great. All right,
it's a 5-minute exercise.
the.
I gave Mike the employee of the month.
Yeah.
It was in July though, it was not August.
Well, Tracy emailed,
He's been on vacation.
emailed me back and said so I gave her best dressed senator.
All right, so going on, the next thing too is typically every new building has a dedication plaque inside it. My experience tells me we want to get all the fingerprints in the world on this so that we properly identify those involved without having it look like the yellow pages.
right. So what's included here is just a typical layout that we had used at a previous job, but
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that the style of this could change.
Just a starting point.
I think what we need is just a location inside the lobby that has blocking.
Yeah, we'll have that already designated in the drawings, and the contractor will own a sign, black.
Right. The actual design and, but however, we should note, we should have a decision on material at a time.
I mean, it should be a
this
bronze
is-
plaque, I mean, that's typical.
Yeah, one bronze.
There's a nice one, I tried to be more.
We usually use brushed stainless.
Right, well, that's what I'm saying.
We
Yeah.
usually use brushed
Brushed
stainless,
stainless.
because of the mass stress on building hardware,
Pocket, it's just.
What, all right, well,
like
let's,
doors and things like that.
again, one of these things, let's get some fingerprints on it, I mean,
It's not that much different to go from stainless steel to bronze. It's
Yeah.
actually a little cheaper
Yeah.
usually.
So, I mean, we're going to have certainly the Board of Selectmen, the building committee. I would envision we're going to have the town planner, the police department, chief, deputy chief.
Right, I think that we will need a final layout and a final design.
But we won't need that till,
Right, so long.
9 months
We've got
from now.
plenty of time.
It could take 9 months to
Yeah.
get this.
so you, I appreciate the starting it now sentiment.
Yeah,
But something that's 18 by 25, if it's on the wall, is,
Yeah, actually,
Should be big
I
enough.
stopped by Salisbury's police station the other day, and
takes up the whole wall.
there was a bronze statue of Wayne Capilupo there.
Oh, you saw that?
They could not have been nicer. The dispatch person gave me a tour of the building, and it was, actually, I should send out these pictures. But it gave us an insight. So I think what you need is
We just wanna make sure
a
that,
location, and we can come up with a size, whether it's 30 by 36, or you just need really,
there isn't actually a whole lot of wall space in there.
I think 18 by 25 is.
So,
is that the,
Oh, yeah, 18 by 25, that's.
we can't even get Eric's kneecap in that,
really isn't a whole lot of wall space.
So there's a smaller strip between the door,
Where do you have it now?
Well, we haven't placed
So
it
you-
because
you
we
come into the lobby.
weren't sure of,
and you have a little wall here by the conference room, you have a wall when you're looking at the dispatch window,
We also sometimes
and
use
there's
the
a little wall
vestibule.
right here.
yeah, I was just gonna say, on the right-hand side of the vestibule, is there a
yeah,
window
there,
there?
we have
Right there,
ample
yeah.
space to do something. We were actually considering putting a counter in that niche in the vestibule.
There's-
And maybe the slack could be there.
Question, do we have a safe haven button for the vestibule?
What do you mean? Like a,
Well, when you come in,
Door will lock behind you, so.
Eric
yeah,
is
yeah.
coming in, his golf partner's upset that he
Yeah.
double bogeyed something,
I
and
believe we discussed it
Club Adam.
earlier in the project about
Okay.
doing that,
Revolve.
and it may have was, it's possible it was just with the police chief, but we discussed it definitely. I don't know what's now in the specs itself.
I think you have it over in Salisbury.
yeah, they have it over, although it's
Been
never
doing
been
it.
used, but it's one of those things that,
If some gal's being chased by
Yeah.
some intruder, they shouldn't get in that lobby.
We've done that before on other buildings, and it does take a little bit of coordination because it is overrides the egress.
But it's not an unmanned station, there are some stations that are, there's no one there,
Yeah,
and people still are seeking safe haven because they see police.
well, they're coming into a vestibule where you have dispatch.
Right,
The point is, by the time someone from inside gets outside to,
they're not supposed to.
all hell could break loose. All right, so I think that, again, just getting this all part of the record so that we can stay ahead of our design team.
Bob, I just heard back from our engineer about the hydrant flow test. They are still reaching out to Dan Lynch, who live in Newburyport, to get that scheduled. And they expect, if they can get a hold of them, it may not happen next week, but hopefully the week after. So
Okay. Well, I mean, I think it's critical,
we gotta get that,
yeah, I mean, because a fire pump is going to be 30K.
and it's gotta have a space to go somewhere in
We've
the
got to
building.
find a space, yeah, so.
That's probably
I mean, I think
Right, there's an issue.
as much as I like to hold the schedule, a week or two at this stage of the game, making sure we get everything dotted is worthwhile.
Agreed.
Do we have a pinup board in the vestibule?
So there's a tack board, there should be a tack board, you have a tack board in there.
Yeah, we were trying to figure out where to put, again, where to put all these items, and I think that that's one of the reasons that we're considering this space for all of those things.
Okay.
I mean, there is this one wall when you come in. Problem with this wall is
It's too small.
It's too small.
Good.
So there is.
All right, moving down the list. Item 12, schedule of probable cost, updated as of 8/16. So certainly this is always a moving target as we get precise pricing on line items we update. I think the notable change here is on line 36, project contingency has been reduced from 10% to 5%, as our drawings now near 90% complete. And traditionally municipalities, Merrimack went down to $125,000 because that's how they made their budget to go out to start construction. All right, any questions? Obviously, the bid process tells us exactly what it's going to cost, regardless of what we think, hope, or pray for. All right, item 13, project schedule. Zell, we're probably gonna need to update this. This was, the one I had was dated June 21st.
I think
We're still on track. This one is still on track, it's got the 28th of August for bid
Okay.
document availability, sub-bids 19th September, GC bids 3 October.
Okay. So we're going to know, I mean, you should know by end of close of business next week if you're all set, if we're all set to go.
Yes.
Definitely.
All right. I mean, the flow test is probably gonna be the big thing that you're,
That's one big thing that
I
we're
know, what,
waiting
I
on.
mean, what do we do there? How big a space? That usually is about 40 square feet that you're gonna need.
It's pretty big, it's pretty big a space. I don't know that we have
Can
a
it go
spot necessarily.
The sprinkler room?
I don't think we have an identified spot for it. I
I'll
don't think
be-
it's an easy spot to just carve it out. I
Well,
think we'll be scrounging for space if we do
Yeah.
need one.
I'll be honest with you, Newburyport water pressure, we all have reducing valve regulators on our water services. Mike, how's your water pressure at your house?
Not bad at all.
Yeah, you probably,
If there's a fire in the area, it goes way down, but it's like normally it's not bad at all.
Yeah.
I have no problem. And I'm a couple hundred feet higher than the station's gonna be.
Things are pretty tight in the building, and in fact, we just had to figure out a space for the gas booster, which is going in the attic, because there's no place.
well, we have an attic.
Well, we have an attic, but I'm just saying, so, obviously, it's very tight. We have to figure out.
All right. While we go around, Eric, any questions on schedule?
No, just, I think you identified that if we have any other last minute comments, it's next week to get it tweaked.
Yep.
And that's it, and then we're ready to go.
Kevin, any questions?
Yes, for the central register bid notice, are we gonna do a site walk?
Yeah, we
Is there a date
assume,
for that?
but I don't think it needs to be mandatory, so that,
Non-mandatory site walk?
because there's nothing there, it's not like we're taking down a building, it's not like we should definitely invite and have a scheduled date.
You have an idea of when you wanna do that, because if I'm putting the ad in, which the first bids are due on the 19th.
Yeah, what I was thinking is, at least a week after the documents are available, and we had scheduled that for the 28th, so the following, I think
Gonna
it's.
be around.
So that would be the 4th, it was
No, I
1
won't be
week
around.
later, so that
We could go 2 weeks, because we're
do it on
scheduling 3 weeks for filed sub-bids, so,
the 9th is the Monday of the,
so the 10th or 11th, I think Wednesday is the 11th, is that right?
yes, that's correct.
Yes.
I get the 11th, Wednesday, I'll be back then.
So if it's not mandatory, but the language in the specifications requires them to be familiar with the site. No exceptions.
They usually show up on their own. with their
Yeah,
own-
the good thing is
Yeah.
the town owns the land, you can go on it, there's no restrictions.
Right, it's not enclosed.
They could.
Right, but what I'm saying is
their
that
own
you don't,
measure.
what the spec will say, you don't have to come to the sidewalk, but you're responsible for being familiar with the site.
Basically, the reason for it is that there are people who will bid this job without ever seeing it.
Right.
Making them be present at a site walkthrough as a requirement of bidding excludes, it takes them out of the equation. And it makes it sort of, you're kind of restricting yourself, because if a New Hampshire guy wants to bid this job, and he doesn't have time to come down here, so what? There's nothing there for him to see. He's got the survey, he can look at online, GPS, he can look at the site, you know what I mean?
Which I use the word, but he is familiar with the site.
But, yeah, we still wanna hold them contractually too.
Oh, yeah.
It's there.
Yeah,
It's
that's all I was referring
Just
to.
making him come to that particular time, that particular day.
I'm wondering if we
No.
go a step further and say, Kevin, in the announcement, that it's not a briefing session, it's just a site walk.
Yeah,
Because what I wanna, and I'm wondering if that's true, like, whether we wanna actually have it like the week before. Or keep it at the 18th, I just wanna, or the 11th, I just wanna, avoid the situation where people think that they don't do anything. They don't start preparing a bid until they think they're going on this walkthrough, or they'll get new information. And so they don't wanna do anything preparing their bids until the walkthrough happens, and then you've got that a week before bids are due, and all of a sudden, you've got a flood of RFIs
Yep.
that happen, and we've gotta postpone the sub-bids because we've got too much work to respond to these RFIs that come in. So if we make it clear to them, there's no briefing session, it's just an opportunity to see the
It's a
site,
formal site visit.
Well,
then.
then if that's the case, Jeff, and Zell's not gonna be here, then I recommend you do it, the 4th.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, however you wanna coordinate that, it's
We'll
fine.
do it the 4th at 10 o'clock in the morning.
yeah.
And Kevin, you're gonna attend that?
Yes.
Or you do the 5th, you can't do.
I can,
But just one person needs to be there to,
if you wanna be there, I can do the 5th, but it has to be in the morning.
yeah.
Okay.
All right, anything else before we go to session? Public,
Yeah, it's nothing more than standing up, saying, welcome, here's the site.
Yeah.
Yep, have
If
fun.
somebody starts wandering off, like, oh, it's Mike Dole's house.
Yeah, you could, I guess basically all you're doing is saying, that's where the fire station starts, that's the neighbor's property.
Guess what,
That's
the
the
bill's going
nominee.
right here.
That's all I'm allowed to say, yeah, we got it.
Jeff, what do you need from us?
I think we got what we needed,
Would you just
discussion in a
send me
second
the-
about,
The date, because I got it included in the invitation to bid
Yes,
document.
yes.
Eric?
So include me on the time.
Yes.
The date and time, so I'll be,
You can tell me what time, actually, I just can't do the afternoon.
I'm available all morning.
All right, 10 o'clock.
Eric,
Yes.
any questions, wrap up for council that you can offer?
No, I think we went through the sign, I understand I got some work there, we went through the bid process, I think that's fairly clear unless, is there anything else we need to know about the bid? And the filed sub bids or?
no, I mean,
Seems like it's-
there's always a wacky situation that comes along, and we'll discuss it if it happens,
Okay.
but, no, it's nothing to take our time off.
And the list of, John had sent a good list of change orders from Salisbury in terms of just a heads up of what was out there, not that you don't have them covered, but I think it was just a good
It just shows you
reminder.
what happens
As hard as we try.
when you have 85% complete plans.
It's a
I
standard.
mean, the hard part is without knowing what caused the change order, was it just an add to scope by the owner, or was it just an omission by the electrical design, or, so. Kevin, any words of wisdom or
No,
questions?
not right now. The only thing that I have to get done is work with Zell,
Yeah.
with Todd, work with Eric on the walkthrough. Other than that, we're good to go right now.
So with TCS, we're gonna go forward with what they've sent us,
Yep.
and we'll just have to wing it from there.
And if they change it at the last minute, we'll slap them.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm very disappointed
It's
with
close
it.
enough to slap.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's unnecessary. If you're too busy, don't bid, I don't get involved, but John?
No, I think we've done a great job.
Okay. Mike, you don't get to ask any questions, you just get to be
That's fine.
pretty face on this
That's
table.
all I'm
Shake your
listening.
head, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Zal, how you doing? Anything you need from us to proceed?
I think we're good.
Okay. All right, let's open this up to public comments.
I got a question about that generator again. Originally, they were gonna take the Seabrook Station generator and use that over at the police station where that's gonna be the emergency room and all. So now the town is gonna buy a new diesel generator for the police station. Is that in the electrical package?
So two things, and then we can chime in on that. The police chief and the board of selectmen have sent off a grant request to MEMA. I guess that is the door into seeing if Seabrook Station will fund or contribute to the cost of the genset. They did it in the past at town hall, so we're following in the same footsteps there. In one of your previous meeting packages, you'll see the copies of the letter. I think it was actually the last meeting, so you'll see that. The genset is specified to run the building. We're taking a generator that's 15 years old and not properly sized, and makes no sense, so we're going fresh start.
That's pretty much it. I mean, I think from our perspective, rather than trying to reuse or to get a third party to donate an actual piece of equipment, it's much more seamless to have the electrical contractor own fully installing, testing, and incorporating the generator.
So the approach the selectmen decided on was seek a grant to offset the cost rather than actually provide it.
Is there any reason or any specification that demands it be a diesel as opposed to natural gas, where you have natural gas on site?
You
Just
know
to
what,
save the diesel storage facility.
Most, it's funny, from a residential aspect, propane, going with natural gas or propane, typically for a critical facility, having diesel on hand in the tank. Merrimack Valley lost all their gas mains for a period of time. Being able to have self-contained supply for X number of hours or days, typically for a
72 hours.
Yeah, so it's supposed to be a portable fuel source essentially, so that, you can actually refill it and keep it running. If it was propane, that's a possibility, but really not likely. If it's natural gas, forget it. You got gas supply or you don't. You can't bring new natural gas in a truck to fill up the generator.
Diesel is typically the way it goes, Tony, is what, I don't think I've ever seen one not be
It's
diesel.
not a code thing, but isn't it a local authority of their jurisdiction? that
Well,
can-
it's actually a requirement for public safety,
For public safety, though.
but it does come down to the local authority having some discretion on that. They can choose to comply with that,
Right.
or they can choose to determine that an alternative fuel source is more preferential for their particular situation, because we have had, on occasion, fire station or police station choose to use natural gas for a variety of other reasons, but it's way more typical to have a.
Plus, when you have a genset with diesel, the tank is included within the structure, where I would think if it was propane, you'd have your 10-foot separation, you need a 1,500 gallon remote tank. I think, Tony, the answer is, a diesel genset is the most common, probably the most economical, requires the least amount of footprint. And that's what we've been going with. But that's kind of the thought behind getting to that decision.
I'm just wondering about, keeping fresh fuel for 3-day supply.
What happens is, this will do automatic testing once a week,
Right.
or whatever the normal cycle will be. And honestly, the fuel conditioners, I hate to say I've got equipment to get fuel in it for a year, and we used to have the right conditioner on it. It seems to be fine.
There is a a requirement for a diesel or an engine in terms of, is it energy conservation or the Department of Energy? There needs to be some certification of its exhaust or use of exhaust that came into the code. Let me dig it up and email it to you.
DEP came out with something where that, and it wreaked havoc because for some reason they wanted to get away from the clapper top on the stacks, which was for rain. And it wreaked havoc because it completely changed.
It came out in March, I think, of this year, something new and updated, and there's sort of a certification, and it's an emissions compliance report, and it states that you have an exterior gas-fired engine, you can only run it at certain times, and then obviously you can run it in times of emergency.
Yep.
But there's some compliance thing, and I was just looking at this a little while ago, just jogged my mind. Let me dig that out and I'll send it to you, and we'll see if we need to add something to the spec to say that
Yeah, I'm not,
compliance needs to be
I
done.
wouldn't know whether or not that's in there or not. I'm sure the electrical engineer is familiar with it, but.
Well, anyone that's bidding this is going to know they have to comply with current code anyway,
Yeah.
manufacturers, so. Any
Yeah,
other?
the biggest requirement that we usually pay attention to is the standoff from the building, from operable windows, so that we don't have to have a
Right.
chimney.
Local fire department usually has a sign off on this, but
Yes.
I don't expect us being more stringent than any of the state codes, government codes.
The last 4 generators I put in, 3 in schools, 1 in the police station, and 1 was propane, and the rest were all diesel. If you go propane, and if you have to bury it, then you still have to have all the tanks above below ground, you got the pad, and you got all the extra posts.
Yeah, propane I wasn't even thinking, I was thinking with natural gas, you have it right there.
Columbia Gas
gonna
one is
be
the best
heated
reason.
with natural
Yeah.
gas.
Yeah, but you're
Yeah.
risking a tragedy. If the gas line blows down the line, then you have no power. That's-
But again, Tony, that's kind of the whole thought process
Right,
behind it.
no, makes sense. I just asked.
All right, any other questions?
On the diesel, is the amount carried in the budget for a diesel generator?
Yeah, it is.
It is, okay. Is there details, can you come up with some details on cost reports, or we're trying to get at, we've been talking about for a few months?
We're going to be finalizing that, Jim. We're getting into that critical stage where this documentation is coming in, and we're reviewing some thoughts with town council on how proprietary is this information at this stage where that we're about to enter into negotiations and contracts. Do we lay our cards up where that all of this information becomes public record, and then every bidder under the sun knows we're at 7.5 million, or?
Many times in the advertisement, we put in the estimated value the town's carrying. We're gonna do that?
You're required to put in,
Required.
you're required to
Part
put
of
in,
the,
you're required to put in a number.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be,
That number.
you guys get to decide what that number is.
Right. Ultimately, the bid is going to dictate what the cost is, all of our wishful
When do
thinking.
you expect to have details of that cost?
We'll let you know, we'll take it under advisement.
Substantial, calendar days to substantial completion, do we have those?
Schedule speaks for itself.
Again, you're gonna define in the documents calendar days to substantial completion, do you have
Yes.
that number?
We have-
There will be a number listed in
I
the
think it's
specs.
365 days.
Is it a year?
Yeah, and then for final.
You're allowing 12 months, I think.
Yeah,
It's
so it's a
like
year.
another 2
365
months for
days.
final, I think, another 60 or 90.
Well, yeah, but the real substantial completion date, so we will have that in the specification, and we'll have the actual calendar days.
Well, it's October 24th, 2020, is according to the schedule.
The alternates, I noticed in your budget, you're not showing anything for alternates.
The alternates are included in the budget.
I didn't see that.
Well, your construction cost is the total sum. The alternates really would be deducted from that amount.
So I thought the alternates were they add alternates?
They're all
They're
adults.
all add.
Well, but they're already included in our
Project budget.
project budget. So it would be a deduct if we
It is
don't
without
go
a
there.
plus alternate.
I don't believe that was ever included. They were always a standalone separate items, and they were about $380,000.
Yeah, Jim, the record speaks for itself, and it is included.
Okay.
All right, we're gonna move to go to
The,
executive session, all right? Last questions?
Could I have a few more minutes on this?
Jim, the record speaks for itself, the documents speak for
I have other
themselves.
questions, Bob.
This isn't a Q&A, Jim, this is a work group meeting.
I understand you opened it for comments, I had questions from you.
Now we offer, you
If
get
you're cutting us off,
comments.
just tell me, I'm glad to
Yeah.
stop. Are you cutting me off, or can I ask questions?
We're gonna wrap up, we're at 8:30, we're already an hour and a half into this meeting. Let's let these two guys have a question.
I only
Fred?
have one question, to make it clear. It's been bouncing around town that the size of the police station has changed. So I just want to know what the official square footage is.
It's in your report. The final square footage is about 9,500 square
So
feet.
it's not 97.
No, it,
Okay.
it was 9,400, once we finalized the drawings. I mean, if we have to put a fire pump in, and we have to make some change and add some square footage, then we will. We've been carrying 9,400 as a ballpark.
As of today, it's between 94 and 95.
It's 9,511 is kind of where it's at. And the additional 100 feet became, on the front vestibule, we bumped that out to 2-story rather than 1-story. And that is kind of the reception area for the chief and all the private
So
offices.
there has been a little bit of a change.
That was a while ago.
No, yeah, no, that's all been in the drawings. We just didn't bother to update the square footage, that 100 feet. On a grand scheme of things that,
Okay.
okay, Tony?
You were talking about the wood frame inspection, is that gonna be on Sam to make sure that the nailing patterns are all within code and the, structural, metal fasteners are all gonna be the right, is that all gonna be on Sam to be there to make sure?
Typically, it's a controlled site that's over 35,000 cubic feet. So what happens is the architectural team of record, they will certify all the inspections, or your consulting engineers, that it substantially complies with the building plans. Sam will do his inspections,
As the
but typically everyone relies on the architect of record or the engineer of record that is certifying the steps of the work that's going on.
So do you know when the bids will come back to the board?
They're in the, if you look at the schedule, there's no, again, guys, if you look at the documents, they actually have a lot of information there.
I don't have one, so I'm just asking.
It's,
19th of September, the sub-bids are due, and the 3rd of October is the GC bids are due right now.
So the first week in October.
the way it's set up, Fred, is depending on where the bids land, before we have to decide whether we're gonna reject all the bids or award a contract, we will overlap with town meeting, at which time we can provide a detailed update at that time. Jim, you get the last comment.
Order of conditions, have they been issued?
They've been issued, if you had been here earlier, Jim, they were approved, and they've been filed, and there's been no appeals. All right, gentlemen, we're gonna go into executive session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
One.
Get the camera.
Yeah, we're gonna,
Do you have to, Bob, do you have to
Adjourn this meeting?
tell the camera that you're gonna only come back into open session
To close up.
to close the meeting?
that's a very, very good point.
Thanks a lot.
Good night, guys. Committee's gonna go into executive session. We're gonna now shut off the camera. We will then reopen the meeting to adjourn.